So, my fiancé took up cooking during quarantine. We used to cook little and instead ate a lot out of the house. We could afford it and tended to eat healthy. Of course, we can both cook, but given our busy schedule, it was easier to eat out. Also, to be honest, I don't really like cooking and consider it a chore to be avoided. I love food, but there are other things that I would rather do in my own time. Due to quarantine, my fiancé has decided to cook more and has found that she enjoys it a lot. This is great. I am happy for her that she has discovered something new that brings her joy. Turns out she's pretty good at it too, and she cares about learning new skills, etc., so I benefited too. I still don't really like cooking myself, as I said, so in exchange for her putting all that effort into cooking, I help her out by paying for takeout in the evenings when she doesn't feel like cooking, and also I do everything else, wash the dishes, clean the table, etc. on the days she cooks. To the best of my knowledge, she agreed that this was an appropriate compromise, and of course, if she felt it was unfair, I would be happy to fill the gap in other ways. But she seemed to enjoy it. As her culinary experiments expanded into baking and became more complex overall, she began to involve me in cooking. I would go into the kitchen to have a drink and check it out, and she would say, "Oh, could you help me chop this while I fry this?" Or something like that. I cut carrots for her or something like that, chatted with her about food, and then went back to my business. I didn't mind it at all. But gradually I became her sous chef, especially when she wants to cook food together. Keep in mind that her culinary experiments are complex and sometimes take 2 or more hours. So my whole evening goes into these culinary endeavors, and it happens several times a week. On top of that, she tends to boss me around in the kitchen and can be a little rude. As you can probably guess, we got into a fight over this. I told her that I don't like her attitude in the kitchen when I help, and I don't like to cook in general. I would feel better helping her if she wasn't so rude to me. But honestly, I don't want to spend 8+ hours every week cooking. It's not my hobby, it's hers. If she wanted me to take part in cooking, I bought everything or cooked something simple. She was very upset. She said it was unfair, that I was enjoying the fruits of her labor but not doing my part. And that cooking took 2 hours and dishwashing / cleaning only half an hour. I told her that it was her decision to cook very complex dishes and that I would be happy if she made a simple pizza or roast. After a certain point, the sophistication of her dishes moves into hobby territory. And I resent being made to feel like a bad partner because I don't want to spend a few evenings on her hobby. We haven't really worked it out. I actually bought / cooked my own food a few times so I didn't enjoy the fruits of her labor. But that seemed to upset her even more, and our refrigerator started to fill up with more leftover food than she could eat herself. Another time I helped her but told her I had to go on video chat at 8 p.m. and she got upset when I actually stopped helping, and left even though I told her beforehand. I'm afraid I told her somewhat caustically that I was not her sous chef to command the kitchen. I tried to discuss it with her again when we felt calmer. I told her that I liked that she found a new hobby. But it's her hobby and I can't help it and don't want to feel obligated to do it. She countered that it was not feminist of me to put the cooking on her and benefit from it without helping her. The feminist connection doesn't make much sense to me because neither of us used to cook much. And she decided to take up cooking herself, but of course I didn't tell her that. I told her that if she wanted to discuss the division of labor in our household, we could do so and come up with something new that reflected the fact that she now cooks more. We tried to do this, but she wanted to count all the time she spends cooking as time around the house. So, according to her ideal distribution of housework, she spends over 10 hours cooking just dinner each week, which somehow leaves me with almost all other chores around the house. I told her I didn't like it because cooking complicated meals is a hobby. It's not fair to say that 6 / 10 hours of her housework is actually her hobby, and I have to do the equivalent amount of real housework, if that makes sense. So we are in a bit of an impasse. Am I really a bad feminist? I don't think I'm wrong. I'm very familiar with emotional labor, mental stress, and all that, but I may be wrong. I love this woman and obviously want to marry her. But we are usually good at making logical decisions, and this is the first time we have had such a disagreement. I don't know how to get her to understand the line between cooking as a necessary activity and cooking as a hobby. P.S. The fiancé has taken up cooking gourmet meals as a hobby. But now it becomes my responsibility to help out and do more housework that I don't think I should. My sister-in-law and I have an agreement. She watches my kids 3 days a week, and I watch hers 3 days a week. This agreement has stood since March 2020 without issues. Any changes have been discussed weeks in advance. A couple weeks ago, we had an argument. The next day, I brought my kids to her house, dropped them off, and left. I didn't speak to my sister-in-law, because when one of us is in a rush, like I was, it's standard for us to just let the kids out, stay in the car, and drive off when you see the door open. I drove to work, about 40 minutes away. When I got there, I had about 20 missed calls, and even more texts, all from my sister-in-law, all saying she didn't want to watch the kids given our argument. Her first text arrived a little before I got to her place, but I didn't see it until I got to work because my phone is always on silent when I drive. I rang her, said I'll arrange to work from home, then come get the kids. She said I have 45 minutes to get back to her place or she would call the police. I told my supervisor the situation, and she said I could leave after I did a few things. This delayed me 20 minutes. When I got back to my sister-in-law's, just over an hour later, she said she'd already called the police when the 45 minutes ran out. I then had to stick around long enough to tell the officer that I didn't abandon my children, there was just a communication issue. Sister-in-law and I had another shouting match later over this. I arranged other childcare for my kids and I've been mostly ignoring her since. However, she reached out and apologized, and has asked if I'd be willing to go back to the old childcare arrangement. I work with kids. If I got child abandonment on my record, I would never work in my field again, which she knew. And her calling the police was a massive overreaction, so if she needs a babysitter she can go whistle for all I care. She said that if I checked my phone, talked to her that morning, or came back when I was supposed to, she would not have needed to call the police, and I did this to myself. As she gave me a warning with that first text and I could have checked my phone or spoken to her directly when I got to her place. All of which she says she would have done if she were in my position, given that we'd argued the night before. I've told her that if she thinks I'm babysitting for her, she's delusional, and she's on her own. Because of my refusal, it's looking like she may have to quit her job because my brother and her would pay more for a babysitter than they would earn from her working. My mother and brother have both called me an arsehole because there were no consequences to her calling the police, and that while she overreacted, she's apologized, so if I really forgive her, I'll let us move on. This income loss would also mean that she, my brother, and my niece and nephew might need to move somewhere cheaper. That my brother might have to take on extra hours at work. And in an extreme scenario they may even be completely unable to live independently, meaning they'd have to move in with her parents, who live several hours away. I'm a 19-year-old F with 6 older siblings. My parents spent most of my childhood spending money they didn't have on my siblings, so by the time I hit my teenage years, I realized I was probably going to have to fend for myself financially when I turn 18. I started babysitting and doing odd jobs around my neighborhood when I was 14, and eventually got part-time jobs during the school year. By the time I was 16, I was working 3 jobs in the summer and 2 in addition to school. When my parents told me they couldn't pay for college, I'd already earned enough, along with scholarships, to be able to put myself through college and have plenty left over. I've continued to work during the school year, and have been able to make money during quarantine by tutoring online. The issue began a few months ago, when my eldest sister got married. My parents spent 30 grand on her wedding, taking out a second mortgage to do so. To make matters worse, my dad was furloughed 6 days after the wedding. They'd effectively dug themselves into a hole they couldn't get out of. 2 weeks ago, my mom texted me for the first time since the wedding. She didn't say hi, ask how I was, or make any small talk. She just said, "Your dad and I need a favor. When can we call you?" I'd expected this. None of my elder siblings are doing well financially, and they've exhausted all other loan options, both from family and the bank. I figured they would text me, ask me to loan them a few thousand, and promise to pay it back when they could figure things out. I was absolutely willing to pitch in a few thousand. and had even considered giving them some of my tutoring jobs so they could make some extra cash. I was not, however, expecting them to demand I give them all the money, close to $40,000. I'd made from the ages of 14 to 18. The exact statement my mom had made was, "You made that money under our roof. We were the ones who allowed you to work, so you only have it because of us anyway. We bought you food and clothes for 18 years. That money is only a fraction of what you owe us," and so on. I said that food, clothes, and shelter were the very minimum. It's what they signed up for when they chose to become parents. I didn't ask for any of it, etc. They responded by telling me that if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have the life I have today. I said they were being ridiculous, and hung up. Since that day, both, along with 2 of my siblings, have continuously hounded me about giving them what is rightfully theirs. My siblings, who have never been asked to give them money, are still professing that it's my job as their kid to take care of them. I told them they wouldn't see a cent of my hard-earned money, and have no right to make such a request. I'm torn. I feel awful for refusing to help them out, but on the other hand, this was their fault. I feel I shouldn't be responsible for fixing their mess. My husband and I don't want kids. My mother-in-law is big into family in the traditional sense. She has been pushy with us about having kids since we got married. Literally the week after we got engaged, she started asking. My husband has always changed the subject, and has even told her that it's really none of her business. Every time we see her, she asks. Everything we do is built around the idea of us having kids. 3 years into our marriage, my husband said we might not even have kids and mother-in-law would not hear it. At year 4, husband had a vasectomy and I had a tubal. So this weekend we were all at their home enjoying some barbecue and drinks and everything. When I get up to grab a beer, my mother-in-law asks me if maybe I should drink water instead, because wink wink nudge nudge. You never know. I was annoyed by this and said, "There's really no chance." Mil, all wide grin, said, "Oh come on. It's time for you two to finally get serious. Put down the beer and tell us when we can finally expect you two to finally make your family official." I said we've been official for about 5 years now, Mil, and drink the beer. Husband laughs with me. Mother-in-law gets more annoyed and says, "You won't be real, last names, until you bless us with babies." Husband repeated. After about 15 minutes of the usual comments, I finally snapped and said, "Husband got snipped. I had my tubes tied. We're not having kids. You need to stop bringing it up. Period." Well, I thought I started WWII. She started crying and stormed off. Family looked at us with disgust and stormed off to comfort her. We left. Party kinda ended. The social media bullshit started shortly after. Vague posts, links about how motherhood is a woman's greatest calling, listicles about how unhappy childless women are, etc. Some meme about how I guess I wasn't a good enough mother and won't be graduating to grandmother. It's obnoxious to the point that I just muted all of them. My mother-in-law finally called me this morning and told me that she was willing to put this all behind us if husband and I came over, and listened to her reasons that we really need to have kids. I told her no, that we are tired of her pushing this on us, and then she said, "You two aren't prepared to be real, last name S. I'd like a refund for what we paid for the wedding." It wasn't that much. It was like $400 for the rehearsal dinner. I hung up on her. When recounting this to my friends, a few of them said that I was the asshole here for dropping it like that. But I don't think she was ever going to drop it if I didn't finally make a serious, direct comment about it.